Houston is a wonderful place. I don't think people cared that blacks lived in these areas, or whites lived in these areas, or Jews lived here. Everyone was comfortable with where they lived. And everyone got along with where they lived. They had everything that they wanted: restaurants, movie theaters, drive-ins, cars, nice homes. The education was wonderful in all of the different areas.
When I was a child during World War II, they would, I think it maybe once a week, they would have a blackout. Everybody would have to turn all the lights out so you wouldn't be visible from the air, and they would have searchlights going on, looking for other planes coming in, trying to maybe bomb us.
So I was about, I don't know, maybe 7 years old, and my great grandmother um, took care of us along with my grandmother and my aunt. We were little girls, my sister and I, and um, I stopped talking to her for about 6 months. I'd go over there every day. I wouldn't say a word to her um, because I had heard that when my father was dating my mother, he'd come to the house to pick her up. My great grandmother would throw rocks at him because he was white. He is white. Not was. He is white. And so I told her I didn't want her talking to me. She finally started talking to me, or apologized to me, and told me that my daddy was a good daddy and that she shouldn't have done that to him. And so I started talking to her again. I told her I never hurt my daddy again. So it's one story I remember growing up in the big house.
Going downtown as a young child, I remember seeing whites, but it was a shock to me because there were people that color with that type of hair, with all of that going on in my family. So I really didn't notice that. It wasn't until I started junior high / what they call now middle school that I started to recognize the the ethnic diversity. Um, Whites were moving out of neighborhoods. Mexicans were being seen more, coming out. I think my 11th grade year was when I really realized that Mexicans were actually a part of our society. Before then, it was blacks and it was whites.
At that time in Spring Branch, is mostly German descent because it was mostly a German establishment. Um, and I was just a handful of Spanish people that were there in that community. And I personally, I didn't think I was any different up until I guess, like I said, in elementary and junior high. And then in my senior year, that's when I first saw my first black. There was a black girl and a black guy. They were not brother and sister. They were just from two separate families, and they brought him in. And that was the first time that I had seen a different type of person because we didn't have any Orientals, any other colors that I saw besides myself and other people that were in Spanish culture. But now you go to that same high school today, and you'll see all kinds of people. And I think the reason why was because Houston became a place where jobs were at, and people are people. They needed places to stay, and the community changed. So now you got, I guess, money, and and I think a lot of understanding came in too because people have to live together, not governments. And I think people just got along. I think things are better today than they were back then.
So I was born in 44, and my father bought the Cleaners in 1945. And I mention the Cleaners because it was a big part of my life. It was close to the home we lived in, and that area was very close to the University of Houston. I always got a warm feeling going to the Cleaners because there were approximately 50 employees that worked in the back of the plant, and you may not know what the summer's like in Houston, but it's extremely, extremely hot. There was no air conditioning. And these employees, when they started, they were all, 18, 19, 20 years old. And to the day they died, they worked in that Cleaners, which again opened my eyes to the kind of tenacity and perseverance these people had to stay on a job where at the end of their time it was never going to be any more than it was at the beginning. But, I don't even know if you even see that kind of loyalty today. I used to love to go there because I could operate, my father would let me operate the sock machine. And it was a lot like flying an airplane because of the way the sticks were.
We lived here probably about most of our childhood, I'd say, or later in teens. It's a city. It's just totally changed from when we were growing up. We walked to school. Didn't have to worry about, it was dark when we walked to school. You didn't have to worry about somebody coming up behind you, or I don't know, just the things that happen in the schools today, or anything like that. We just did our homework, went outside and played, and came back.
No helmets on the bikes?
No helmets on the bikes, but we made it through it.
Well, back in the 70s, I was in high school, and it was a lot different than now, I think, versus black, white, whatever. We didn't really think about, the race that much. We all just pretty much, well, in our school, wasn't that many blacks anyway, but now, versus now at the school that we went to, it's almost all black. So things do change, but we didn't have a problem with it. Homosexuality was just coming out. Nobody really knew they were. They just were kind of weird, thinking, why am I this way or that way? But now that it's kind of like you're either cool or you're not.
It's like another race.